It is good to be back after such a long break. And it looks like Hokuzono is really flexing his creative panel muscles this chapter as well, which is always appreciated. Also, the personality that's beginning to leak out of the newest Hoshaku member Kuguri is sure to lead to an amazing struggle between these two samurai. With all the enchanted blades put on a forcible cooldown, should they awaken the wrath of Somura, who can just instantly detect and teleport to any released sword he finds, this is the very first fight in which Chihiro needs to rely solely on his pure skill with swordsmanship, as opposed to the supernatural abilities of Enten. The problem is, even though the veterans of the Seitei War were in possession of their enchanted blades for less time, a mere year or two compared to Chihiro's extended 3-year connection, it seems that all the original wielders still were able to form a significantly stronger bond with their blade than he is. And Ro, the leader of the Masumi, assumes that this is most likely due to Chihiro never being taught the basics of swordsmanship and lacking a base foundation in combat. Whereas all of the original wielders of the enchanted blades were all extremely powerful soldiers in the traditional sense. Due to Kunishige Rokuhira dying at the hands of the Hoshaku, and Chihiro being taken in by Shiba, who, albeit is a great guardian, isn't familiar with the art of the blade by any means. And because of this, Chihiro has essentially just been freestyling his fighting style this entire time. Which, don't get me wrong, is downright impressive. Chihiro bested Sojo, took down the Rakuzachi, and even fought on par with his newborn rival Hirohiko. The problem is, as this has created terrible habits in Chihiro, such as constantly relying on Enten's abilities to make up for his shortcomings. Instead of having a strong sense of combat and acrobatic skills, with the additional extension of the enchanted blade powers, Chihiro has just become the literal embodiment of an enchanted blade merchant. And now that Enten is unusable, Chihiro is drastically nerfed, more than any of the other original wielders would have been. Because of their original training, wielders like Somura and Aruha were still pretty deadly with just the average katana, both of them specifically being able to fall back on the basics of the EI White Purity style to take down threats. Compare that to Chihiro, who acknowledges his own flaws while in battle with Kuguri this chapter, as once distance gets put between the two, Chihiro acknowledges his first fallback would have been to use one of Enten's abilities here. But now, without them, and no training without them either, Chihiro has to adapt pretty quick. Meanwhile, this chapter also focuses heavily on giving us some more characterization on the Hoshaku member Kuguri. We still don't even know the name of the other Hoshaku member, and it's revealed that she's either just been knocked out or has taken a break, face planted to the floor after the car accident. We do get insight into how much sword fighting and the dynamics of the traditional blade art matter to someone like Kuguri, as we've seen him rant previously about how sword fighting is a way for true warriors to express their thoughts and feelings, creating a conversation of sorts, as he calls it. Kuguri is normally all about completing his mission. However, his brain is physically wired to desire intense sword battles, like even more so than it is to instinctually desire sex, food, and human connection, to the point that it actually just takes him over like an unstoppable urge, forcing him to engage in sword combat. In just the first exchange of sword slashes though, Kuguri is immediately unimpressed with Chihiro, even picking up on his own at the fact that Chihiro is untrained in just 3 clashes of their blades. And Ro, who watches from afar, also acknowledges that nothing Kuguri has done so far has involved sorcery and is just plain sword mastery, slicing through an entire bus in clean slashes, using extreme speed to overwhelm Chihiro in just one single strap. Kuguri is just a genius with the blade. And it's revealed in this chapter that most hand-to-hand or close-quarters fighters do involve spiritual energy to some degree, usually involved in empowering the user's attacks or defenses. In sword fighting specifically though, a person needs to extend that spiritual energy outside of their body and into the blade to create a fueling cycle, something that Chihiro has been neglecting to do properly because of his heavy reliance on Enten's innate powers. While Chihiro can extremely amplify the spiritual power of his own body, such as when he uses the Nishiki cloak, he struggles emitting and maintaining that spirit power in Enten itself, previously always opting to just empower Enten with attacks like Kuro or Akka. And not for nothing, Nishiki is also just another application of Enten as well, just hinting at Chihiro's inexperience with spirit manipulation as a whole, which again does make sense considering his need to always brute force his development, at least up until this point. It's for this reason that while Kuguri acts as a perfect example for Chihiro to emulate, he's also the worst possible matchup for Chihiro at the start of his traditional training journey. And of course though, to Chihiro, who just pushes his way through any wall or obstacle he's ever encountered, he's more than willing to learn on the fly and adapt to this fight as he sees fit. Meanwhile, Kuguri, on the other hand, is just not interested in that experience at all. In fact, it does nothing but piss him off and paint Chihiro in a bad light, because, funnily enough, it reminds him of Hirohiko, and when the Hishaku leader Yura tasks Kuguri with training Hirohiko in the art of the blade. As someone who respects the craft and honors the origins of its traditions, sword fighting is nothing more than a tool for Hirohiko and Chihiro to achieve their ultimate goals. Whereas Kuguri suggests looking through history and studying the sword masters who came before, Hirohiko brushes Kuguri off and says he doesn't need to do all that, and the power will come to him eventually. He's an intuitive learner after all, someone who examines subjects in a sometimes unique and more creative way. Similar to Chihiro, honestly, as people like Hirohiko and Chihiro prefer learning concepts on their own and in their own unique methods, as opposed to, understanding people and consulting what others believe on them. In a way, it displays their tenacity and self-confidence, but also a little bit shows a disrespect of the people that came before and the struggles that they endured to carve out the knowledge for future generations. And for someone like Kuguri, that is held in the highest regard. And this is just plain unacceptable. In his own words, how can Kuguri engage in a decent sword fight with an idiot who can't even respect the ancient art of battle? As he slashes Chihiro out of the way and sets his sights back on Iori, he's just bored with the idea of fighting such a troglodyte. And this attitude towards swordsmanship explains why Kuguri wanted to hold on to his chosen enchanted blade, despite lacking any kind of contract with it, wanting to deepen his understanding and relationship of the blade before he even has the luxury of wielding it on his own. Kuguri is a man who prioritizes his own swordsmanship over even his own job. As once Chihiro finally does pique Kuguri's interest, his brain is incapable of comprehending anything else but engaging in the art of blade combat. And Chihiro, after Kuguri's disinterest and harsh words, was able to tap into his understanding of his ex-role model Somura and use his imagination to mimic the pure white Ei style in order to fill his katana with spirit energy and release it in one large burst of speed. And despite this being some immature imitation, it is more than enough to send Chihiro's feelings and resolve directly into Kuguri's brain, who, after wrestling with his duty, admits he can no longer ignore this chance and just wants to have a sword fight. Because not only will defeating Chihiro prove his worth as a swordsman, he can also prove to Yura and the Hishaku in one swift motion their ignorance of true art. With the knowledge that Kuguri's words actually got through to Chihiro, as opposed to Yura and Hirohiko who just outright ignored Kuguri's pleas for the understanding, maybe Chihiro can rise to the occasion, which is not only a great opportunity for Chihiro to learn on the fly with an unironically great teacher who might, based off of his love for swords, just prioritize fixing Chihiro's sloppy style more than actually beating him in the fight. This might be the best chance we have of getting away and rescuing Iori, considering we know that the other Hishaku member is just out of commission, at least as far as we know, considering we haven't seen either of their sorcery potential. She could have some kind of crazy spell or ability that raises the stakes much higher than they currently are, but regardless, at least we know that we'll be getting an amazing sword fight between these two samurai. And especially with the guilt hovering over Chihiro that it was his fault for putting Hikori in such a dangerous situation and jeopardizing his storage sorcery. That hunger for growth will fuel his development in the battles to come. Thank you guys so much for making it all the way to the end, and make sure you hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe so you don't miss any future Kagurabachi videos if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, peace.